Every so often I see somebody say something like, there's nothing we can do for other people. Our only goal, or the only good goal, is to enlighten ourselves. And this has some truth to it, but it also misses some aspects of Buddhist awakening. It can be difficult to wrap the mind around, but Buddhism, to me at least, is the perfection of both wisdom and love. There's a lot of evidence from early texts and later Buddhist teachers that's showing that this dual approach, this perfection of love and wisdom, is a very Buddhist thing. And I consider Thich Nhat Hanh to be at the core of my own Buddhist experience. He opened the door for me. When I was younger, my mom bought me a book, and it started me on this path. His Buddhism is an engaged Buddhism. We engage suffering in the world. A lot of this has to do with engaging suffering in ourselves. When we understand what not self is about, we end up removing the boundary between self and others. We realize that as we help ourselves, we are helping others. And as we are helping others, we are helping ourselves. To say we only save ourselves is to miss the point, to keep that thick, dense line in between this notion of self and this notion of others. So now I'm going to share some teachings from early Buddhism to help make this more clear for my friends. So after reading the Lohika Sutta from the Digha Nikaya, I took some notes and then wrote up a little thing. I'm going to read that now. Helping others understand is a very Buddhist thing. In the Lohika Sutta, we hear about how a Brahmin guy named Lohika had a thought. Suppose a wanderer or a priest had discovered some useful insight. Having done so, he shouldn't bother telling anyone, because what can one person really do for another? Telling someone else is really just a sign of continued attachment. That was his thought. And this thought, it still comes up a lot. I've seen it pop up all over the Buddhist internet. And this, in my opinion, is what the term Hinayana is really all about. It is a small, one-person boat. It's like a bike compared to a bus. A narrow view of enlightenment. It is the lesser vehicle. But here, in this text, the Buddha shares some stories and helps Lohika dismantle his narrow view and open up his loving heart. So here in this, there's a garbage truck. Here in this sutta, the Buddha gives us something that is very Mahayana. This sutta is held to be important by all forms of Buddhism, but especially Theravada, the teaching of the elders. I personally don't spend a lot of time worrying too much about the differences between these two broad categories, these two approaches to the Buddhist teaching. So the Buddha ends up telling Lohika something like, "Don't you reside in a place of abundance?" What if someone said, the Brahmin Lohika lives in a place of abundance, and he should hoard the goods, enjoying everything himself, not giving anything to others? Wouldn't such a person be a danger to those who depend on you? And Lohika agrees. So the Buddha goes on elucidating the error by walking him through a series of good points. He says something like, such a person would not be one who cares for the welfare of others. Not caring for others, this person's heart would be full of hatred, tend toward hatred. A heart full of hatred is a mind with wrong views. And wrong views lead to one of two rebirth states, either an animal rebirth or a hell rebirth. So it's not really so good for oneself or others to fall into this kind of hard-heartedness of not sharing insight. And then the Buddha goes through the same sequence of points, but he talks about the king that provides for Lohika. who's given him this place to live. It drives home the point that this kind of greed leads ultimately to an unhappy state for all. And the Buddha sums this up by saying, suppose a wanderer or priest had a good idea and thought that he better not share it, because he thinks, what can one person really do for another? Such a person would be a source of danger to those who follow. Being a source of danger, this person is uncompassionate, and their heart is grounded in hostility, and that constitutes wrong view, which ultimately leads to an unhappy state. So, in short, we do share our insights. It's like that part of the Buddha's story when he attained Buddhahood. He almost remained silent. He almost became a Pratyeka Buddha. But a god came, the great Brahma, and pleaded with him, helping him to realize that some people are ready to understand. So the Buddha moved beyond that state called solitary Buddha, that Pratyeka Buddha, and he taught his path to many people for many years. So we also come across sayings in the Buddhist texts like, strive on from the island of yourself. Strive alone, depend on yourself, take yourself as refuge. But then at the same time we have take yourself as your only refuge. We also see take the Dhamma as your only refuge. There's this wrong notion that the internal and external are these like two vastly different arenas. So, but having understood the teaching of Anatman, this no self, like I was talking about earlier, we have dissolved the boundaries between self and other. And we realize that helping others, we help ourselves. And helping ourselves, we help others. And so we keep striving alone, together. Now, I'm going to read from the Mahapadana Sutta, the discourse on the lineage, the great discourse on the lineage. Here in this sutta, the Buddha tells his own biography by talking about Buddhas of past. So he kind of explores this notion of this archetypal Buddha, this frame, this story that all Buddhas go through. And in telling these stories about past Buddhas, we learn about the Buddha's own experience in this life in which he attained his Buddhahood. And even in the Buddha's experience, just before he attained, or just after he attained his great awakening, he also had the thought that Lohika had. He thought, this that I've obtained, why should I proclaim? Those full of lust and hate can never grasp it. Leading upstream this Dhamma, subtle, deep, hard to see, no passion-blinded folk can see it. And this is the point at which the great Brahma comes and pleads with the Buddha. Here is the request in verse form. As on a mountain peak, a watcher sees the folk below, so, man of wisdom, seeing all, look down from Dhamma's heights. Free from woe, look on those who are sunk in grief, oppressed with birth and age. Arise, hero, victor in battle, leader of the caravan, traverse the world. Teach, O Lord, the Dhamma, and they will understand. So, if you read on the internet, you go around, you ask people, what's the difference between this notion Mahayana and this notion Theravada, you'll hear that Theravada people only care about saving themselves. Mahayana care about saving others. But to me, this is not a good way to understand the difference. Both the traditions care about saving everyone. Here in this text that is normally associated with Theravada, we see that this focus on others has been with it from the start, from the very start of the Buddha's proclamation of emancipation. The Buddha realizes and then says, confirms that he's going to teach, he says, "Open to them are the doors of the deathless. Let those that hear now put forth faith. For fear of trouble I did not preach at first, the excellent Dhamma for men, Brahma." And then from there, the Buddha goes on to teach. In this story, which is about the Buddha Vipassi from a long, long time ago, that Buddha goes and teaches two of his friends. But our Buddha goes and teaches the 5 original friends. He invites them to go forth. And here we're provided with a really nice definition of going forth. It's a bare definition. It's not overburdened by a bunch of notions about conduct. It's clear. It's the core of that change in a person's direction, going forth. It says, "Patient forbearance is the highest sacrifice. Supreme Nibbana, so say the Buddhas. He's not one gone forth who hurts others. No wanderer he who harms another. Not to do any evil, but cultivate the good. To purify one's mind, this the Buddhas teach. Not insulting, not harming, restraint according to rule. Moderation in food, seclusion of dwelling, devotion to high thinking. This the Buddhas teach." I like it because it's so direct and simple and profound. I've also seen people talk about how they say Buddhism is not evangelical. Well, it depends on what we mean by evangelical. The root of that term is sharing the good news. And in this way, Buddhism is very much evangelical. But today we associate the term with a certain kind of unskillful sharing, where we try to force our notions onto people. Buddhist evangelicals are indeed open to sharing the truth of the Dhamma, but we're not so aggressive and mean. We don't need to scare people with notions of hell and denial by some creator God. The quote that I'm thinking about here from this Mahapadana Sutta, here it is. "I allow you, monks, to wander abroad for the good of the many, for the welfare and happiness of devas and humans." This is also a title of the Buddha, teacher of gods and humans, devas and humans. He says, "Do not go together, monks, but teach the Dhamma that is lovely in its beginning, lovely in its middle, and lovely in its ending, both in the letter and in the spirit, and display the holy life, fully complete and perfect. There are beings with little dust on their eyes, who are perishing through not hearing Dhamma. They will become knowers of Dhamma. But at the end of 6 years precisely, you are to come together to the royal capital of Bandhumati, which is the capital of this Buddha's father, to recite the disciplinary code." And that's the code of conduct that was appropriate for those who have gone forth at that time. And if we remember that all things are impermanent, morality is conditioned, we will also remember that this code of conduct, it must change with time, or else it won't be appropriate for the people. And the majority of those monks left that very day to wander about the country, teaching. So here, it is a Buddhist thing to go teach and share the Dhamma, the Dharma. We don't need to be afraid to share what makes sense to us. If we do it in a certain way, a certain gentle, skillful, loving, and wise way, people will respond. Some people will understand. And our sharing will help generate this collective momentum. Many people will benefit. I do believe it is a very Buddhist thing to share one's insight with love. And that was the whole point of this rambling session. So, thank you for listening. That's all. Bye-bye.